Morning, everyone. So yesterday was interesting. I'm just going to actually start off because someone's thrown a super chat in immediately. Brad, £5 super chat, thank you. Says Robinson, to be Tommy Robinson, is the very thing he claims is the enemy, an asylum seeker living in a luxury hotel, trashing communities while grifting off others. Quite, there's been a lot of that, and that's what upsets me most of all. And that's what, when this is over, I don't want to look back and say the only people who've really had consequences were those who were effectively conned themselves. I mean, don't get me wrong, the people who've gone out to destroy property, to threaten people, even to try and murder people, they chose to do that. They chose that. They chose a life of hate. But at the same time, the people who were playing them, the people who were sort of teaching them to hate, it would be very upsetting if they got away with it. But I mean, yesterday, throughout the day, we knew that they were planning. It's been 7 days. It's been 7 days of violence that began in Southport, the very community that was grieving the murder of 3 young girls. And these people who claim that they cared about these girls and their families thought, I know what's the best way that we can help them. We'll kick the shit out of their community. And then it went on from there. And we had that bright spot at the start of the weekend last week on Friday with the Liverpool Mosque being defended by an absolute huge number of members of the local community. And then we've had more violence, some terrifying violence in Rotherham and Tamworth. And yesterday was billed as being the biggest ever. There were going to be there was 30. They were targeting mosques as usual. They were going to be targeting communities in general. They were going to be targeting lawyers. They were targeting asylum charities. They were really going out there for their biggest act of violence. And what we actually got was no violence. There were a couple of little bits of argy-bargy. There's been the odd arrest, but there's no actual violence. No one's been punched in the face. No windows have been kicked in. No buildings have been torched. Nothing. Because what actually happened is first of all, there was a huge police operation in place anyway. There were huge numbers of counter-protesters, you would say, anti-racism protesters. By far and away, the biggest was in East London. There was also Bristol. There was a large number in Brighton, in Liverpool, in Newcastle. Absolutely huge numbers. Huge. And it's broken the Daily Mail and the Daily Express. These are the front pages of those papers today. These have done as much as anyone to promote the hate and the fear that has driven people to go out and basically smash up their own country. And look at it now, the Daily Mail, and the Daily Mail is the most like, it's actually quite incredible. Like, Daily Express is just United Britain stands firm against thugs. It's but the Daily Mail specifically is describing the as anti-hate marchers. These are the people who are, and even in their own photo. I'm just going to point this. I'll actually just do the couple of super chats first. I want to point something out before I forget. So Gary DeSantis, £5 super chat. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Moorhouse. Good morning to you too, Gary. And Anthony Fisher, £2. Loved your 5 p.m. video yesterday, Phil. It was a very long one. Unfortunately, I can't train him. So I just have to do with it. But I just want to point something out for those who might not be aware. You may not be able to see it all that clearly. On the Daily Mail front page, this is what's most remarkable, because the Daily Mail have a long history of literally promoting fascism, right? They literally promoted the Nazis under, I suppose, the father of the current owner. But still, it's not just their long history. Even recent history, they've used very dehumanizing language. It's the Daily Mail, wasn't it, that described our judiciary as enemies of the people. They've dehumanized asylum seekers in particular, but also other groups of, what should we say, non-white Little Englanders, should we say. Doesn't actually matter whether they're immigrants or not. They will demonize groups in this country who are as British as anyone, just because they don't fit that sort of white supremacy mold, right? But if you look at the Daily Mail today, And the photo they've chosen to use, which you won't be able to see too clearly on this one, and that it's this, I think, is Walthamstow, which is where you had, it is, in fact, it says under the picture there, where there was like 10,000 I saw reported, which I can believe looking at the photos. And you've got a load of banners there with socialist worker branded on it. So the Daily Mail are basically promoting the socialist worker. What a day. What a day to be alive. Isn't it incredible? But it is incredible. I hope this is it, because the thing is, although there were lots and lots of there was lots of violence planned, it didn't happen. In Brighton, you had a few hundred anti-immigration people turn up. We can call them protesters now. They can actually be called protesters because that's all they did. It's not necessarily what they intended, but it is all they did, because they wouldn't have gotten away with damaging property or anything like that because they were massively outnumbered. So all they effectively were was protesters. And then at the end of it all, they basically went home. There was 3 lads left having to be protected by the police. I don't think they realistically would have needed the protection, but, to keep them away. And it's, but we don't know. And we also knew throughout yesterday, I sort of had an inkling we might get away without a lot of violence for a few reasons. One of which I was seeing reports on social media, because I've been following this like all the time, of course, of these groups that were trying to organize the violence, basically saying, don't go out there. It's a trap. I can't do an Admiral Akbar voice, but it's a trap, they were saying. It wasn't a trap, because the people who did, because there were some that went out. Do you know what? If they didn't cause any trouble, they weren't arrested. It wasn't a trap. You could have gone out and protested against immigration. You didn't get arrested unless you started on someone, right? So it wasn't a trap, but that's what they were saying. It's basically. But what was the cause of it? Was it the massive police operation? Because it was absolutely huge. It was the biggest police operation there's been, protecting the specific targets. Was it the news that there were going to be, because you're not going to get people turning out I know Walthamstow was by far and away the biggest counter protest, but there were large ones in other areas as well. And you're not going to get that spontaneously happen anyway. That has to be coordinated. So they knew that there were going to be and they knew they were going to be outnumbered by the counter protesters. Or was it the fact that because the prison sentences were starting, and there's a comment there, I will come to it, because the prison sentences were starting to come through in the news, did that put off what I call the middle class thugs? Because if you think about who was taking part in these riots, there's let's be honest, they're Nazis. The core of them are Nazis, right? And you're probably not, if you've got people who've got swastikas tattooed on their forehead, threatening prison's probably not going to work. But there's not many of those, right? So what you had was what I'd call the middle class thugs, the ones who have been whipped up to this anger against immigration, but they've basically got nice lives. They've got a decent income. They've got a nice job, or they've got their own business. They've got a nice family life. Prison's a threat to them. Even a few months in prison's a threat to them, because they're still away from their families for a few months and they've lost their job. If they've got their own business, unless they've got someone to carry on that business, if it's a one-man operation, that business is gone. Or you can try and pick it up after you come out, but you're making no money while you're inside, because it's your own business. And if you're in prison for a few years, then that's really gone. So was it just the fact that the far right have now had all of that extra support drain away to the point where if all they've got left is the hardened nutters, there's not enough of them? But I am just going to come to this thing, because people keep saying about someone just said, so I've got to read this out. Rob Reed Jones, careful, Phil, if you say Admiral Akbar, Jenrick will want you arrested. I don't really care what Jenrick wants. But no, people are saying about, what about these sentences? Why are they smaller than the JSO sentences? They're not, right? So let's be clear about this. At the moment, there's 3 reasons why it's a false comparison to look at the sentences that have been handed out so far with the Just Stop Oil sentences. 3 reasons why it's a completely false comparison. Really drop it. First of all, the people who have been sentenced so far have not had a trial. There was a trial with Just Stop Oil. Why was there a trial? Because they pleaded not guilty. If you plead not guilty and you're found guilty, you get a harsher sentence for wasting everyone's time, right? So the sentences, we've not had any trials. There's been 0 trials take place for the rioters. The people who have been sentenced so far are the people who have pleaded guilty at their court hearings. And if you plead guilty, you get a shorter sentence. That's part of the deal, isn't it? Otherwise, because the idea is, if you are guilty, to try and persuade you to say you're guilty to, first of all, save court time, but also where there's victims involved and other people, not to put them through the ringer. So there's always an explicit benefit in pleading guilty. If you are guilty, you get a shorter sentence, right? So the sentences we're seeing now are those shorter sentences because they've pleaded guilty. Second reason it's a false comparison is the people who were put in prison for the Just Stop Oil antics were not the people who carried out the actual acts. They were the people who organised it. So the actual offence was conspiracy. We haven't had anyone go through the court system that's organised these riots. It's only been the low-hanging fruit. The people who've been sentenced so far are the people who've committed like an act of violence. They've kicked a window in or they've punched a copper or something like that. It's like, and even that, the guy who punched the copper's got 3 years, although he's also got a string of other convictions, so that may have played into that. So the sentences we've seen so far is it's the thin end of the wedge. What we will see later on are the sentences of people who plead not guilty, so they'll get harsher sentences, and people who've organised it. Now, how high up that goes, put it this way, if Tommy Robinson's in the frame, he's not getting 5 years, put it that way, he's getting a lot more than that. I just hope they absolutely throw the book at him. But that's the third. Then the third reason why it's not a useful comparison is because you're not going to get public opinion on your side by trying to make that comparison, because the public wanted those people from Just Stop Oil to go to prison, and they were excessive sentences. Lawyers have said they were excessive. They said they were ridiculous for the circumstances, but public opinion is not there. And I keep saying about JSO, they're no allies of people who want the climate emergency tackled, because all they're actually doing is turning public opinion off the cause. So don't make that. I would advise against making that comparison. But they're completely invalid comparisons on a whole range of reasons there. I've got to read it out, but I've no idea what it means. Captain Bart Roberts, £5 super chat, says, we hate Illinois Nazis. I don't know. I mean, I suppose there are some in it, huh? Oh, it's Blues Brothers. I haven't seen that for years. Don't try things like that. Graham's just whispering in my ear. He's my pop culture expert. And then Josh, £5 says, hi, fellas, the lack of investment in infrastructure contributes to these people falling for the con of the far right, and what can be done? Yes, 100%. Think about where these people are coming from, not just where they've attacked, but where they've come from. Deprived areas, a lot of deprived areas where they've seen over the last, funnily enough, 15 years, investment drain away from their communities. And so, for example, these people can't easily get a GP appointment, or their kids' class is really full. Other public services, they struggle. Housing, they struggle to get decent housing. And then someone tells them there are decent houses, but the immigrants are, because like the Daily Mail, what do they do? All these, and the Daily Express as well, but the Daily Mail in particular, all those stories they've run over the years about how people have come here from abroad and been given a five bedroom detached house. It's absolute rubbish, by the way. But that's what they push. They push this all the time, that it's not just that you're in the queue with immigrants, they're ahead of you. That's what the likes of the Daily Mail have been pushing for years. In reality, it's not true that anyone is ahead of them in the queue. But they also think about the queue. They just think, I was discussing this with Mike Galsworthy yesterday, like think about GPs, for example, trying to get an appointment with a GP. So they in their head think, I can't get an appointment today because there's this massive queue. They think if the queue's smaller, I could get an appointment today. And then they think, well, if immigrants weren't in the queue, I could get an appointment today. So we shouldn't have immigrants, right? But then what they don't understand is, okay, but then you wouldn't have doctors either. So the queue might be smaller, but there's also fewer doctors. So you'll actually be in the queue for longer because there's fewer like checkouts, if you like. They don't think of that side of it because all they've got is people like Nigel Farage saying the queue is bigger because there's immigrants in it, which is not even very true because if they're immigrants, they've probably come over. They're probably quite young. They're not really ill. There's not that many in the queue, quite frankly. Most of the people in a queue for a GP are elderly or have long-term illness or something like that. Neither of which is the typical characteristic of someone who's just come to this country, right? But that's what they're told. So you 100%, you have to get healthcare back up to the point where it can manage the queues. Because if people are going, oh, there's too many immigrants in the queue for the doctor, can you get a doctor's appointment? Yeah, well, what's your problem? Same with housing. Oh, they're taking up too much housing. Have you got access to decent housing? Yeah, then there's not a problem. Make sure people have got access to decent housing. Make sure they've got access to public services. Make sure they've got decent jobs. Get rid of the deprivation and you get rid of the fuel for this. It's as simple as that. Now, that doesn't mean to say you get rid of all the hate because, you know, there is still going to be race, even in a society that doesn't have large levels of deprivation or the level of inequality we do in our, because it's absolutely massive. The UK is particularly bad when it comes to inequality. For a wealthy nation, it's especially bad. And you'll still have racism, you'll still have xenophobia, but the smaller the group that subscribe to that view, the less of a problem it is. So the lack of investment is 100% the cause of this. So ultimately, you know, you're talking about the media and the Tories. If you could keep the Tories out of government forever, we can't. But if you could keep them out of government forever, well, not with our current electoral system, then things like this couldn't happen. This couldn't have happened if the Tories had never come in and cut back investment. You wouldn't have had the sheer number of people being angry at immigrants. Emma Price, £5 super chat. Thank you. It says, I think we need to own the term silent majority, take it away from the fascists. The silent majority was out in force. Exactly. And it showed it was. The rioters, I mean, okay, this picture is like the most extreme one. But even if you look everywhere where there was like a counter protest, they outnumbered the anti-immigration lot everywhere. Like in Brighton as well, you know, Newcastle, as I say, in Liverpool. There were various places and they were outnumbered everywhere. You know, just the rioters, when they were causing all that destruction, there were like hundreds of them, hundreds. There were thousands here. In the case of like Walthamstow, like 10,000, but, you know, there were thousands of them. The rioters couldn't hope. If they could get that many people out on the streets causing havoc, it would be anarchy. Anarchy. We'd have to send the army in. There'd be no choice in the matter. But there weren't enough of them. Public opinion. The fact that the Daily Mail would print that headline today means that they know where public opinion is. That's their readership. Like, they're pandering to their readers. They know that their readership will not accept anything, because it's not their instinct to publish a front page like that. That is not what they've been pushing for the last few years or even last few decades. It's not what they'll be pushing in the future. When they think they can get away with demonizing immigrants again, they will be back onto that. But for this one moment, that's the headline they've published today, because they know that it doesn't matter what their readers might think of immigration in general. They do not think that kicking the crap out of our towns and cities, or even trying to murder immigrants, is an appropriate response. Which is why, as I say, it was really remarkable, this thing, when it actually described them as, it didn't say, night, you know, I mean, like the Daily Express is more the sort of headline you could go, okay. I mean, for the Daily Mail to actually call these counter protesters anti-hate marchers, because that's not how they've usually described these people, is it? I mean, the Daily Mail are amongst those who describe the pro-Palestinian marches, which were peaceful, as hate marches. And yet, what have we got here? in the background. I mean, I know that's not the one, the image the Daily Mail have chosen. We've got Palestinian flags there, look. In amongst people, no one's got an issue with that. No one's going, oh, put that hateful flag away. It's not a hateful flag. It's a national flag. And, and this is the majority of people. Then there was another one. You're stretching me today. Knackered Merrick, just a $4.99 super chat with no message, but thank you very much anyway. Right, so let's just try and catch up with some comments here. Curious now on how this affects Labour's approval. Will it be seen as a moment of failure or a men's show of strength? It can't be seen as a failure. How can it? At the end of the day, no one is good. Like, there are some outlets, GB News chief amongst them, who are trying to push the idea that the riots are Labour's fault because they cancelled the Rwanda plan. People don't believe that. People aren't going to believe that. It's utterly ridiculous. So, no, what Starmer did immediately is he called an emergency meeting and got senior police chiefs round and said, what do you need? And they said, we need these things. He said, right, you can have them. And then I think it would have happened anyway, because it would be driven by the Crown Prosecution Service. But obviously he was in charge of the Crown Prosecution Service in 2011 when the same thing happened. He's the one who basically set the system up. Making sure, so the government still had to make sure that the courts, because remember, so magistrates' courts have been doing the stuff so far. We haven't had the serious trials yet, remember? That'll probably be for the High Court. But so we should see some really high profile cases coming. It really needs to happen. But so far it's been magistrates' courts dealing with it. Well, we've got half the number of magistrates' courts now that we did in 2011. So the government have had to make sure that extra resources could be provided. The government have had, because we need people on remand, right? So even if they're, there was a clear thing that no one gets bail just because you charge. You're not charged and out on bail because you might attend another riot. Everyone who was arrested and charged remains in custody until they're acquitted, and no one's yet been acquitted because there's not been any trials. So people pleading guilty, they are held in remand until sentencing. People who are sentenced obviously need to go to prison, but obviously prisons are full. So what the government's had to do is free up a load of previously unused detention centres or closed down detention centres to make sure we've got the room. I don't know how it's been staffed, by the way, but again, so the government have provided extra resources to make sure that this judicial process can take place. So they, and we've had the Cobra meets and stuff like that. And if this is now it, we'll look with bated breath, because we don't know, have the far right been beaten, or are they is it a tactical withdrawal while they think about their options? I don't know. But if this is it now, and it will be it at some point, but if this is it now, it'll be down in no small part to the fact that the government have presented a clear message. If the Tories had been in charge, they'd have been trying to work out how they can say, oh, this is very wrong to do the rioting, you naughty people, but we don't think you're racist. Oh, no, we don't think you're racist. If you look at the way the Tories are behaving at the moment, there was all this talk about, oh, Keir Starmer going on holiday while we're rioting. He never went on holiday while we were rioting. Rishi Sunak has. Do you know where Rishi Sunak is right now? He's in California. Rishi Sunak buggered off quickly enough, leaving Robert Jenrick to be the voice for the Conservative Party, which has not worked out too well. More super chats here. Raj Sood, £10 super chat. Thank you very much, with a flying pear or something. I don't know what that is. And pulling out a £5. Could Starmer be planning on getting a quick trial for Tommy 10 names for a strong deterrent against the others for taking part? It's quite clear that Starmer... So, for example, I don't think we should have had any sentencing at all, quite frankly. It's very quick. I think there's been a lot of government pressure to get sentencing happening where people have pleaded guilty in order to get it out in the news. Because it's very obvious, the main government strategy has been let people know that they're going to be going to prison to stop them going there in the first place. Because remember, they're trying to target those people for whom prison is a deterrent. What's happened is, I mean, if anyone who's been following it knows there's been a large number of people who've been breaking down in court crying, they've all been men. There's been plenty of women charged. There's been a few women charged. But there's always been men, the ones who break down in tears. And including one person who pleaded not guilty. So they're going to have a trial. But then the judge told them they're not getting bail. It's like, no, because you might just go out and commit another riot. So you're held in remand. And that's the point. Every single person that's charged knows that night they're sleeping in a cell, and the next night and the night after. They're not going to get to go home with their family. They're not going to get to read their kids a bedtime story. They're not going to get to have what they want for their dinner. These people know if they've got a job, do you know what? They ain't got a job anymore. If they've got their own business, like I said, unless there's someone else to manage that business, that business ain't going to be running. It's in mothballs at least, and that could fatally damage it. Particularly if the local community gets to know why your business is closed for now. Oh, it's because you ransacked our town. Yeah, we're not using your business anymore. So these people are crying in court because their life has come crashing down. And from their point of view, they thought they were going to get away with it. They thought at worst, because in their minds, what they were doing is maybe a bit of like a bit of drunken, disorderly behavior of a Friday night, where you often get a bit of a tap on the wrist. Maybe you get put in the police cells for a night for a bit too drunk to be let loose again. You might get a fine, £100 fine or something. That's what they thought would happen to them. And if you've got a decent job, you think, oh, £100 fine, yeah, that's fine, I can get away with that. But it's like, no, you're going to prison. You are actually going to prison. And Labour were desperate, absolutely desperate for that message to come out through the news, so that those people don't go. And if those people don't go, if all you've got left is the core who don't care about the threat of prison, it's not enough of them. The police can manage them. But anyway, there we go. The police will be trawling through video footage for the perpetrators show even them played their part to admit guilt. Yeah, I'll tell you, one of the things, and I think the media should have pushed this more as well. There's one particular conviction that they should have pushed, because there's lots of people who've gone out with like face masks and stuff, balaclavas, thinking they'll get away with it. There was one lad, was it Sunderland? I think it was Sunderland. It was somewhere in the northeast, where he had it was actually quite famous. He had a balaclava on, but he also had he had a shirtless, a sleeveless shirt with quite a distinctive tattoo, but it doesn't matter. He's been convicted. But what they should be pushing as well is the idea that people who've been wearing face coverings have been convicted. Because there's other distinguishing features as well. But there we go. If Tommy claimed asylum anywhere, can we point and laugh? Yes, but we want him back. In actual fact, Cyprus has actually said, if we I don't know what he's planning on doing. Is he going to come straight back to, because he reckons he's just on holiday. Oh, so he's going to be back, is he? We'll see about that. Because there is an arrest warrant out for him from before the riots, because he skipped the country. Remember, he was supposed to be in court last week. He fled the country. He's not on holiday. He's fleeing the country. He's claiming. But Cyprus authorities have said, if we want to open up extradition proceedings, they're more than happy to listen to them. So I don't think he'll be staying in Cyprus. But again, it's absolutely maddening that his so-called supporters don't realise that this guy lit the fire, let them deal with it. The Tommy Robinson supporters are going to prison, and he's living like a millionaire. Life O'Reilly. So that needs to stop. But there's way more people. There are people who've been inciting this, I noticed for people who know Matt Goodwin, I notice he's no longer at the University of Kent. So they've binned him. He's gone completely off the wall recently. But people like Darren Grimes and Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and Lee Anderson, there really needs to be consequences for those people as well. They're the ones, I actually do think Tommy Robinson has, I think he's bitten off more than he can chew here. I think he's not coming back to Britain as a free man. Let's put it that way. I think if the next time he's in Britain, he's arrested, and I don't think he's been set free for a very long time. That's what I think. But the other ones in the media, I'm not going to hold my breath. But at the same time, I cannot look back on this and say that justice has really been done if the people who incited the... I'm not even talking about the people who over the years have provided this dehumanizing language. I mean, the people who actually incited these specific riots. But anyway. Duke Vengeance, the online insiders have found Nigel Farage, Richard Tyers, Isabel Oak. So, see, Nigel Farage was a bit sly. Isabel Oakeshott, Andrew Tate, although Romania's got dibs on him. Tommy Robinson, definitely. Lee Anderson, Darren Grants, Katie Hopkins, Lawrence Fox. Lawrence Fox, I think he's shitting himself a little bit. He went off to Ireland at the weekend. I don't know whether he's back or not. But he also put up on Twitter yesterday, or was it the day before, that the rioters should be jailed. Almost like he's a little bit worried. But people like Isabel Oakeshott, Lawrence Fox, were directly spreading the disinformation. So was Nigel Farage as well. He reckons, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. It was because Andrew Tate said so. Because, Andrew Tate, who is being charged with human trafficking and rape by Romania, is obviously a brilliant source of news of what's going on in Southport when he's not even in the country. I mean, what a ridiculous excuse that is. You say there'll be Nick Griffin, this got a lot to answer for. A lot of them have. They won't. I mean, Nick Griffin won't have anything to answer here unless he's found to be one of the instigators. But the way the pyramid will work, so obviously those who went out and about, and this is the thing, it's like there was a former prosecutor who was saying, if you compare it to 2011, you've got like a pro and a con. The con is that the justice system resourcing is much poorer now. The Tories have cut everything back. So our Crown Prosecution Service is more poorly resourced. Our court system's more poorly resourced. The prison system's more poorly resourced. Policing is more poorly resourced, right? So the resources are much poorer. However, we also have an easier time in getting older people, because all we had in 2011 was a few clips of video. What we've got in 2024 is the stupid bastards have been filming their own criminal sprees. They've been live streaming their own stupidity. So, and even though when a lot of it's on TikTok and TikTok streams then sort of disappear, but if you've got criminal investigators who are at the time recording what's being live streamed, they've got all the footage. So all these people who've been pleading guilty, and this is why most of them will plead guilty, because the prosecutor just goes to their defense counsel and says, we've got a video of you breaking the law here. Would you like to plead guilty and maybe get a couple of years? Or would you like to plead not guilty and get 10 years? Which is it to be? That's what's happening. So that's why most of them will be pleading. It's only the proper thickheads that are pleading not guilty, because they've literally been shown the video footage of their own law breaking. But that's the bottom tier. Then you've got the next one up, which is the ones who were instigating who are organising the violence, and they didn't turn up to it themselves. They're sat at home, lovely. They just organise it on the computer. So you've got to find those people, bring those to, and you need to get those people. You need to get them off the streets, because if let's say this is over, what's to stop it starting up again in another 2 weeks' time? So you need to start to dismantle all these networks, right? You can't do it on the social media side because, as the government's shown, you can put a bit of pressure on them. But if the social media companies themselves, like Twitter, for example, aren't going to play ball, then at the moment, there's not a lot we can do. So you have to take the individuals who are using the social media platforms out. But then what about the people really behind it in this country? Obviously, the ones outside of this country, there's nothing we can do. But what about those who are behind it in this country? Those are the people that we really need to take out, must take out. And that includes in the media. And I really don't think we will. But what I do think is Labour need to think about, even if we can't take those people out now because of this, because the legislative situation doesn't allow for it, how things need to be changed to make sure it can in future. Because, for example, like the Conservatives passed an online safety bill, which has some useful things in it. It was largely dismissed as not fit for purpose, but it has some useful things in it. They're just not in law yet. They don't come in law just yet. But one thing that's been noted that it didn't cover was disinformation on social media. There was a fear of, oh, it could conflict with freedom of expression. No. It's a complex problem. I get it. Work it out. You cannot just say, oh, because we can't think of a way to deal with it, we'll just have to allow disinformation on social media. No, that's not how it works. Captain Bart Roberts, £5 super chat saying GCHQ will be doing their thing. Oh, yeah. I mean, the thing is, a lot of these organisations are now very poorly resourced, but it is absolutely in Labour's interest to make sure that this is dealt. They were already going to anyway. David Lammy was talking about the fact months ago, before they're even in government, about the need to deal with this. So obviously that is now going to become more urgent, because something like I say, if we think it's over now, what is to stop it happening in 2 weeks' time? Or if it doesn't happen again this summer, because these things do tend to coincide with summer, the better weather. Like no one wants to go out rioting when it's pissing raining. So what is to stop, which is why there'll not be any rioting planned for today. It will have been planned for yesterday because they'll have looked at the weather report, right? Today's raining. Or what's to stop it happening next summer? So they'll need to make sure they prepare. They don't want this happening every summer. So they need to think to themselves, if they think they can get away with it this summer, what do we do to make sure this can't happen next summer? And part of what they can do, of course, is get rid of all the visible signs that stoke people's hatred. So make sure that the small boat problem's dealt with. Make sure that the hotels, housing, asylum seekers dealt with by processing claims properly, having safe routes, all the rest of it. But also, things like tackling housing and public services. You can't solve all that in 1 year. So Labour are going to have to understand they are going to improve these conditions. But in the short term, what do? You have to break up these far right networks. You must break them up. So that's now what needs to happen. But anyway, massively over time. So we'll have to call it there. Thank you very much for coming on, everyone. Have a brilliant rest of day. It's a much better day, at least, and hopefully it will continue. But there we go. Thanks for coming on. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.